Hi, I'm Josh, and I am so grateful you've decided to spend a bit of time with me as I go through my year of 2022 from a board gaming perspective and see what kind of year it was for gaming. It was a great year. So I'm going to be going through numbers of games played, game ratings, the worst of the year, the best of the year, and look at what my biggest surprise of the year was. Now, please bear with me. I spent some time compiling these stats while I was in the hospital. I ended up spending 12 hours in the emergency department a few days ago with what turns out to be diverticulitis, because I don't have enough bowel problems already with my Crohn's disease, apparently. I'm now taking 6 tablets daily of 2 different antibiotics. And I hope that's going to work because I'm absolutely terrified of having to have a 3rd bowel resection surgery. The previous 2 were for Crohn's disease. But I'm kind of struggling to stay upright a bit today, and I probably should give myself a bit of a break, but I'm falling way behind in my videos, so I just wanted to keep moving forward and distract myself with a fun retrospective on the year of 2022. So let me tell you all about what a great gaming year it was. All right, let's start out by looking at some stats. And I was initially only going to look at the number of unique games I played throughout the year because I didn't really track individual plays per se. However, since I was sitting in the hospital for 12 hours and I had some time on my hands, I thought I could probably go back through the records I kept throughout the year and get a pretty good, quite accurate estimate of the total plays throughout the year. And as I go through all the stuff in this video here, I thought, hey, I can probably give you a 2-for-1 deal here and give you the stats I have for the games that Paul played with me throughout the year as well, so that you can get kind of 2 different perspectives on all the games that were played with the 2 of us. Now, I have not obviously included all games that Paul played in 2022 because he's played games with other people besides me. But in terms of the ones he played with me, I'll be including those stats as well. So for total numbers of games played, I have 54 unique games that were played by me throughout the year. And of those 54, 36 were played with me by Paul. Now, in terms of total number of games played, so obviously many of these games were played multiple times, I've come up with around 125 unique plays of those 54 games. In terms of total plays, what's kind of interesting to me is that only 20 games that I played throughout the year were new to me, but I've played those games about 66 times, whereas the previously owned games, there were 34 of them, and I played those about 59 times. But like I mentioned previously, it's not a huge surprise that games that are new to me, I'm going to want to get to the table more frequently. So my first countdown of this video is going to be a countdown of the games that I played the most number of times in 2022. Now, I was looking at where I should make that cutoff, and it just so happened to work out that if I cut it off at 5 plays or higher, I have 5 games that I played a minimum of 5 times in the year. So starting off with the 2 games that I played 5 times, we have Jump Drive, which I rated 6.5 out of 10 and Paul rated 8.5, and Arboretum, a game that I rate 8 out of 10 and Paul 7.5 out of 10. Stepping up one level to the game that was played 6 times throughout the year, and that was King Domino Origins, a game that I rate 8.5 out of 10 and Paul rates 8 out of 10. Next up is kind of a surprising one. It's one of my lowest rated games of the year. We played it 7 times just so I could give it a fair shake and try to find what I was missing in this game, but that is Verona Twist, a game I played 7 times, and yet I rate 4 out of 10 and Paul rates 5 out of 10. I really tried with that one and ultimately didn't work out. What's very interesting, before I get to my most played game of the year, is that those 4 games were all new to me in the year 2022. And I guess that really shouldn't be a big surprise because I am more inclined when I play a new game to want to explore it further, whereas the games that I've played a bunch already, I'm, happy to pull out for a one-off here and there. But in terms of my number 1 most played game, that is going to be Magic the Gathering, and that's just because I have one friend who most of our interactions together are to play games of Magic the Gathering. I played at least 6 sessions of Magic the Gathering throughout the year, and then with each session, obviously we played several games, and that's a game that I rate 7.5 out of 10. And if you had told me 5 years ago that Magic the Gathering would be my most played game of the year, I would have thought you were crazy, but there it is. Now the final stat for numbers of games throughout the year are games that I sold from my collection and games that I purchased and acquired. So in terms of games sold, I sold 14 games in 2022 and I acquired 15 games. So it really fits very nicely with my general policy of 1 game in, 1 game out to kind of keep my overall collection size roughly where it is right now. And in fact, I would have sold more games than I purchased throughout the year, except a couple of the games that I put up for sale didn't end up selling. So it would have been closer to maybe 17 or so games that I would have liked to sell and that I imagine will be sold in the future. The next stat is kind of more important to me because this is the overall ratings of the games that I played in 2022. And personally, I'd rather play fewer really highly rated games than play a whole lot of slightly mediocre games. Well, or would I? It's just fun to hang out with friends and play games anyways. I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's just talk about the ratings themselves. So of the 54 unique games that I played throughout the year, my average rating across all of those games is 7.2 out of 10. Now, of the games that I played with Paul, I have to say that Paul is a more generous game rater than I am because his rating of all those games that he played with me is 7.6 out of 10. So a little bit higher than me overall. Now, what was interesting to me is when I broke down those ratings over games that were new to me versus games that I have previously played before. And it's really kind of unsurprising how it all worked out. So for the 20 games that were new to me, I gave them an average rating of 6.8 out of 10, whereas Paul rated those games 7.8 out of 10. This matches pretty closely with the ratings that I gave to the games that I acquired in my collection, which there's going to be a lot of overlap there, obviously, between the newly acquired games and the newly played games, although not all of my newly played games are ones that I own in my collection. Some of them obviously were provided by Paul and other people, but in terms of the games that I acquired, I have a slightly disappointing average of 7 out of 10, whereas once again Paul rates it higher at 7.8 out of 10. Obviously, I only purchase games that I think I'm really going to enjoy because I try not to buy a lot of games in general. Like I said, I have a kind of a generally 1 game in, 1 game out policy. So an average of 7 out of 10 is a little bit disappointing for that group of games. Now, unsurprisingly, games that I had previously played and thus I knew I enjoyed, my average rating of those 34 games is 7.5 out of 10. Interestingly, that exactly matches Paul's rating of the games he played with me, which is 7.5 out of 10. So, yeah, obviously if I've kept a game in my collection and I've come back to it again, it's obviously going to be a game that I rate very highly. Before I take those ratings and dive into my worst and best of the year, let me just take a quick second to thank my Patreon supporters, especially my higher tier supporters, Abe O, Joanna, and King Booty, and most of all to my highest tier supporter, Asmanda's Perfect. The only monetary reward I get from all the hours spent making these YouTube videos is from you, and so I appreciate every single one of you. Now, let's have a look at my worst games played in the year 2022. To come up with that list, I thought I would go with every game that I rated 6.5 or lower, and 6.5 is still a decent game. It's still one that I would enjoy playing, but it's not one that I would likely keep around in my collection unless it's something that is particularly enjoyed by my kids, for example. I have 9 games that fall into that category, and I'll count them down from my highest rating to my lowest rating. Games that have the same rating, I've tried to kind of rank in order. So we have, at the very top of this list, Jump Drive, which I rated 6.5 out of 10, and Paul rated 8.5 out of 10. Then The Builder's Antiquity, I rate 6 out of 10. Mountain Goats, with the Mountain Goats expansion pack, I rated 6 out of 10. And interestingly, I purchased Jump Drive and Mountain Goats both at the same time from somebody who was selling them used for very cheap. And so I thought, you know, for the price, it would be worth giving them a shot. And, you know, I did have a bit of fun with them, and then ultimately turned around and sold both those games. Continuing on the games that were 6 out of 10, I have Brains Family, Bergen and Draken, which is one that my son Evan in particular enjoys playing with me, so that's why it stays in my collection. We have Looney Quest at 6 out of 10, and then for the last few here, we drop below 5 out of 10, so we're getting into the stuff that I really didn't enjoy very much. Starting with a game that way back in the day was one of my old favorites, but I've really kind of gone off that particular type of game now, and that is Conquest of the Empire, which I rate 4.5 out of 10. Next up at 4 out of 10, we have Verona Twist again. We have next at 2.5 out of 10, Backgammon, and then my worst game that I played in 2022, I rated 1 out of 10, and that was a dumb activity that was called In a Pickle. Every game that I mentioned throughout this video, I've talked about in previous videos when I did my kind of board game roundups for the month, so definitely feel free to go back and you could probably just search Josh Yaks with the name of the game you're looking for, and it should come up. So that was my list of the worst. In terms of games that I played with Paul that he rated less than 7 out of 10, there were only 7 from him. We have Ex Libris, which Paul rated 6.5 out of 10. Dawn of Peacemakers, unfortunately, which he rated 6.5. Even more disappointing, we have Steam Torpedo, which was also a 6.5 from Paul. It's just a game that I can't find anybody other than me that enjoys that one, unfortunately. We have our first crossover in terms of the worst of the year with Mountain Goats and the expansion pack, which Paul rates 6.5 out of 10. Next, we have the cooperative game Flashpoint Fire Rescue, which Paul rated 6 out of 10. We have Raptor, which Paul also rates a 6. And then the worst of the year for Paul was Verona Twist, which he rates a 5. Switching now to the very best of the best for the year. For this rating cutoff, I went with all games that I rated 8.5 out of 10 or higher, and that came up with a total of 12 games. Interestingly enough, only 3 of those 12 were new to me for the year. All the rest I had previously played. In this one, we're going to count down from count up, I don't know, from lowest rated game to my very highest best of the best. So, starting at number 12, we have Super Motherlode, which I rated 8.5. Next is K2 with some expansions that I also rated 8.5. Just forgot how great a game that is. Still at 8.5, we have Codenames Duet, the 2-player cooperative version of the wonderful kind of word guessing game / kind of party-ish game, Codenames. And then we have another 8.5, The Quest for El Dorado with its expansions. And then the final 8.5 was the new to me game, King Domino Origins, which turned out to be such a big hit. Now climbing up into the 9s, we have Hero Kids, a role-playing game that I play with my kids that is just really so well done. We have Clask at 9 out of 10, which is kind of a simple yet very fun dexterity game. We have Telestrations at 9 out of 10, which is just a party game that is quite a riot to play. The cooperative game Spirit Island is 9 out of 10. The final Clask was new to me, so the third and final new to me game for the year that is also 9 out of 10 is Planet Unknown. Oh, we got one more that's 9 out of 10, and that is Clank with all its various expansions, Temple of the Ape Lords, Golden Silk, Sunken Treasures, and so on. And then the final one, which I rate 9.5 out of 10. Unfortunately, I didn't play any 10 out of 10 games in 2022, but we have the ancient and still fun game of No Limit Texas Hold'em, which I did get to play one time last year, 2022. And boy, did I miss playing it. Way back in the day, I used to play in a monthly tournament with a big group of people, and that was always so much fun, and it was just so great to finally get back to a game of Hold'em again. Now, having a look at Paul's top 10, again, these are rated higher than 8 out of 10. Paul has 10 of these games, starting with No Limit Texas Hold'em at 8.5. Next up, we have Cascadia, which is a game that I purchased, and I rated 7 out of 10. I thought it was good, but not good enough to keep in my collection. Paul rated it 8.5 out of 10, so I just ended up giving the game to Paul. I was expecting more out of the game because it was a Spiel des Jahres, or a German Game of the Year winner. But anyways, moving on to Paul's next one. At 8.5, we have Spirit Island. At 8.5, we also have Codenames Duet. And one of the biggest differences between my rating and Paul's rating is Jump Drive, which Paul rated 8.5. And then his last 8.5 was Super Motherload. Getting up to Paul's 9s here, we only have 2 of them. We have Oneironauts, just a really fun, simple party game that has some similarities to Dixit. And we have my third best game of the year, which was Planet Unknown, that we both rated 9 out of 10. Now, Paul does have a handful of 9.5 ratings, starting with Haggis, which was kind of a simple trick-taking type of, or ladder climbing style of card game. We have all the various Clank expansions for Paul next at 9.5. Oh, and that's it. I guess Paul's highest games of the year were Haggis and Clank. And where the ratings were identical for Paul, I just kind of guessed on how he would rank them. Again, could be not 100% accurate, but that's just based on my gaming with Paul, what I think he would rank them as. All right, we're going to wrap up now before I collapse from exhaustion with my top 3 surprises of the year. Now, starting at number 3 should not have been a surprise. This is an old game I've had for ages and I've played a bunch, but like I mentioned briefly previously, I just kind of forgot how good it was, and then when I got it out again, I just wanted to keep coming back and play it again and again, and that is K2. I have the Broad Peak expansion and the little Avalanche promo. And then the boards themselves are double-sided, so they can be played in slightly different ways. And K2 is just such a simple yet extremely tense gameplay where every single card you play feels like it could be a life or death decision. Because your climbers can literally die in this game, so you're just trying to keep them alive as you climb as high as you possibly can on the mountain. I've said before that I think K2 is the game that has the simplest rules that most captures its theme and how the game plays out, and that this really shouldn't be surprised because it was actually designed by an actual mountaineer. So he did such a wonderful job in capturing the feeling and the struggle of climbing the world's biggest mountains. My second biggest surprise of the year was a new acquisition for me, and that was King Domino Origins. I knew I would probably enjoy the game, obviously, that's why I bought it, but I did not know that I would rate it 8.5 out of 10 and would want to just keep coming back to it over and over again. Everything about the game, for some reason I have this weird love of prehistoric themes in games with cave people and mammoths and all that fun stuff, stone tools. I don't know what it is about the theme, but it just seems to grab me. Then there's the physical production. The gorgeous components of the game are just so well done. And then the gameplay itself is simple, quick, snappy, and just so satisfying to put tiles together and build up your little area. So as I think about it here, before I get to my number 1, I've realized all 3 of these surprises of the year share a commonality in terms of being just very simple to learn, yet immensely fun to play. And so my number 1 surprise for the year is by far not one of my highest rated games of the year. In fact, it didn't make my top 12 of the year that I just went over of games that were rated 8.5 and up. This is a game that I rate 7 out of 10 and maybe deserves to be a little bit higher. I should maybe bump that up to 7.5 out of 10. But it's a game that I found being sold again by another board gamer who's selling a used copy for super cheap. I thought, hey, again, it looks like it could be fun. It's worth a shot at that price, and that is Traders of Osaka, a very simple, mostly card-based game where you're trying to acquire goods and get the most money you can out of those goods as ships kind of travel the trade routes. But because of how easy it is to play and how quick it is to play, I found Paul and I kept coming back to it. We went through this kind of interesting progression where our initial plays of the game were just a little bit longer. It's not a long game by any means, but our initial plays were longer as we were kind of figuring out how the game works. And then they became very quick as we kind of figured all that out, and we could kind of get a game done in under half an hour pretty easily. But then as we continued to explore the strategy and all the little nuances that were in there, the games kind of lengthened again as we kind of had to think more about each card we played and each turn we took. So this little unassuming game really took me by surprise. And it's just such an impressive little design, even though it doesn't really look like much. It has the kind of trading goods in the ancient world theme that so many games tend to take on, but it's just done so really well. And that is my board gaming year in review. I'm going to do something similar for my books shortly, but in the meantime, I would love to hear what your favorite game you played in 2022 was. What was the best of the bunch for you? Were there any big surprises for you for that year? Please do go into the comments and let me know. I would love to carry on the discussion with you, and I just really appreciate you watching. Thanks. Hey, it's Josh. You know why I'm here. Sometimes you just need that friendly reminder to give a little thumb up, to subscribe to the channel, to share the video with somebody who would enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers. Games, some of these, and I wasn't, and I thought that the countdown of the games that I placed next to, before I take those ratings, but it's a game that went on